Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and as promised, and since you asked for it, here's a smackdown between the two lightest Intel Core i5, i7 laptops on the market, the LG Gram and the Samsung Notebook 9. Now we're going to talk about different sizes, and we have a couple of different sizes in-house to help you decide which one is best for you and which one is best overall, if indeed there is one that's best overall. We're going to smack them down now. So you're looking for the lightest possible laptop, whether it's a 13-inch, 14-inch, or a 15-inch size, but you still want your Intel Core i5 or i7 full processing power dual-core 15-watt CPU inside, Intel 7th generation Kaby Lake. So usually, Ultrabooks start around 3 pounds or so for a 13-inch size, and you're looking 4.5 to 5 pounds for a 15-inch size, and those are the lightest ones that are available. So these, well, they're much lighter. It's crazy light. In fact, 1.8 pounds for the Samsung, which is significantly under a kilogram. And for the LG Gram 13, well, it's a few ounces, a few grams heavier. Okay, it's around a kilogram. So incredibly light. Now, when it comes to size, the Samsung, as you can see here, we have two of them. We have the 13.3-inch and the 15.6-inch available. LG says, well, how about a 14 as well in the middle, which is the one we have here. And that is a nice size to offer because the footprint's still relatively small, but you get more screen real estate. You get the idea there. So if you really had your heart set on a 14-inch, it would be the LG. Now, in terms of pricing, they both start at $999 for the base model of the 13-inch, and they go up from there. In general, the LGs are going to be more expensive, particularly the higher configuration models. The lower end, the Core i5 models are around the same price as Samsung, but when you get up to the Core i7s, it tends to be bundled with the touchscreen, whether you want it or not. That also adds to the price. So when we're talking about the 15-inch, this is where Samsung really pulls ahead, and we'll talk about the features in a bit. The Samsung is $1,300 to $1,400. The price keeps varying on Samsung's website for that, and that's for the top-of-the-line 15-inch model, whereas LG charges $1,700 for their top-of-the-line 15-inch. Both of them, you're going to get a Core i7-7500U. That's, again, dual-core i7 CPU inside, 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and on the Samsung, you get a 256 gig PCIe NVMe SSD. So, faster SSD, people who are into specs care about this. Will you ever notice? Not so much unless you do a lot of file copies, but NVMe is the top of the line these days. You get a regular mSATA, about 512 gig on the LG, which is nice. The LG has a touchscreen, the Samsung doesn't, but the Samsung adds Thunderbolt 3 as well, and NVIDIA 940MX dedicated graphics. Now, it's low-end dedicated graphics, but it's enough to notice the difference if you're playing casual games, older games, or if you're working in Adobe CC. And it's less money. So you can tell right away I'm leaning towards the Samsung if you're looking at the 15-inch. If you're looking at the smaller sizes, though, they're relatively comparable. First point, though, displays. Both lines have lovely displays with near full sRGB coverage. They're both glossy displays. They're both bright, around 300 nits or a little bit better. Similar contrast, some of the nicest displays you're going to see. Experientially, you look at it and you say, I just want to watch a movie right now. They're good enough for photo editing. The LG is very glossy. It has a lot of glare. Samsung uses an anti-reflective coating. You can't really see it on there. It doesn't create a haze or anything like that, but it's pretty effective at knocking out glare, much like the MacBook Pro. So that's a positive for it. For display also on the Samsungs, regardless of which size you get, you're going to get HDR mode. So it's more noticeable in the 13-inch, or more pleasing, where it makes things pop, more color, more contrast, that sort of thing. And you have outdoor brightness mode. So if you plan on using these outdoors, 500 nits of claimed brightness. We measured over 500 nits on the 13-inch, around 550. Our 15-inch, though, didn't come in as bright as Samsung claims. So I don't know if there's a problem with our particular unit, with the software driver update that it got, but it's supposed to be. Anyway. For LG, there is no HDR mode, there is no outdoor mode, but it's still a fine and nice display. As we continue on with other little perks, Samsung, no touchscreen. So if you want a touchscreen, once again, LG. LG offers it both ways. You don't have to have a touchscreen with LG, but if you want the higher spec Core i7 with the bigger SSD, it gets bundled in. Yeah. But Samsung has a fingerprint reader, both sizes again. It works with Windows Hello, which is a nice feature. Both of these have backlit keyboards. Last year's models, the small ones didn't, the 13 inches. So now we have backlighting all across the board for all of them. LG has a more traditional white backlighting. Samsung uses a kind of yellowy green. I don't know it works, you know. I don't think many people care too much about the color of that. They both have short travel keyboards, around 1.3 millimeters, but they're both surprisingly usable. I like the tactile feel on the Samsung a little bit more, but they're both pretty darn close, to be honest. In terms of performance, well, you're looking at pretty much the same thing inside. Obviously, if you get the top of the line 15-inch with the faster SSD, you'll get faster SSD benchmarks on there. LG's benchmarks are a little bit lower than Samsung's. In part, that's because a lot of the models ship with only 8 gigs of RAM. That's unfortunate these days, you know, because everybody wants 16 gigs. It's just the thing. Even though you probably could get by with 8. Only the very top of the line 15-inch has 16 gigs. But big plus for LG is there is a RAM slot in there. So you could upgrade it to 16 gigs by putting a standard 8 gig DDR4 laptop RAM module inside. That would get you to dual channel memory. So the reason why the LG's benchmarking a little lower is our 8 gig model, and like I said, most of them has single channel RAM. So that's going to drop down the performance numbers a little bit, especially if you're relying on integrated graphics, which all of these are except for the top of the line, the Samsung 15-inch model right here. While we're talking about the upgradability of these things, the Samsung's a lot easier to open it up. There's just Phillips head screws here. You take them off, the cover pops right off. There's not a lot to upgrade inside of Ultrabooks typically. Even the Wi-Fi card on both the LG and the Samsung are soldered on, but you do have access to the socketed M2 SSD on the Samsungs. Now the LG, like I said, has a RAM slot. Woohoo, that's kind of exciting. But mostly it's exciting because it makes up for the fact that most of them only have 8 gigs of RAM. For the LG, there's Phillips head screws, but you have to pull off every single one of these rubber feet and the little rubber covers to unscrew it first. It's a little bit of a pain in the neck, okay? But you can get inside, and then, again, M.2 socketed SSD, so it's upgradable, and you have your single RAM slot, which is unoccupied in all the 8 gig models, is occupied if you get the 16 gig 15-inch model. Both the LG Gram line and the Samsung Notebook 9 line are clad in metal alloys. LG uses a nanocarbon magnesium casing, whatever nanocarbon actually means, and we have an aluminum alloy casing here. Now for the smaller ones and for the LG, there is some flex. That's the nature of something this thin and light. The panels have to be thin and light. So with the Samsung and with the LG, there's maybe a teeny bit more on the LG actually. And this is the 14-inch one. 13-inch could be more rigid. Flip them over, where you usually have more base rigidity. And by the way, neither of these will torsion if you're holding it like that. You just can't possibly. A little bit more flex on the LG, but there's some on the Samsung. Now if you move up to the 15-inch Samsung, the lid still has some boingy boingy. It flexes a little bit, but less. And the bottom is actually more rigid than the others, which is interesting. Now, how are they making this feel rigid, given the fact that these plates are so thin and light? They're putting rubber bumpers inside. You can take a look at the internals, you can see, and on the inner side of these lids, there's little rubber standers that help keep things a little firmer here. So that's the drawback with, if you feel it's a drawback with all of these thinner, lighter laptops. Very thin panels, probably easier to dent. We're not going to test that for denting here. And a little bit more flex. And all of them have some display flex, whether it's the LG or the Samsung. Now the 15-inch is actually not too bad compared to the 13-inch flexes even more. And there we go. So there's flex on the lid. Of course, do you grab your laptop and do this to it? I hope not. But some people do try to carry them like this, one-handed. And it's actually okay. There's not a lot of dangerous flex there. I wouldn't worry about it. The bigger issue is really the fact you have just about no bezel on either of these. So there's not much of a place to grab them by. And just for giggles, we'll do the same thing to the poor Samsung here and carry it like this. Notice the Samsung opens up to 180 degrees. If you find that useful, that's a Samsung thing, just like Lenovo does that too. And the LG opens up about like yay. So it opens pretty far back, but not flat if you need flat. Both of these are fairly fingerprint resistant for you tidy types, which is nice and pretty easy to clean with a damp cloth. So trackpad, a lawn trackpad on the LG Gram models, and we have a MS Precision trackpad made by Synaptics on the Samsung. The Samsung does win. It feels very Mac-like, very responsive, very good. But honestly, the one on the LG isn't bad. It has a nice little positive feeling of a click there. It's not one of those cheesy, it feels like a thin piece of aluminum or something like that. It's not that bad. I do like the Samsung better, but it's not far enough apart that I would call that really much of an issue. Now, when it comes to webcams, we don't usually talk about them much. There's not a huge variation. But with the LG, you get the chin cam, just like you do with the Dell XPS line, because they made the top bezel too thin to actually fit a webcam. webcam. So it's on a hinge barrel and it rotates as you open up the laptop. It changes the angle of the camera and it catches you under the chin, which isn't flattering. It's 720p. The quality is a little bit lower than average, I would say. Samsung has it in the traditional place up top, 720p as well, and the quality is okay. And the good news is people are not going to be getting a stellar view of your nose hairs. Both, by the way, have Intel 8265AC Wi-Fi, and again, it's soldered on board, but that's not much of a biggie there. So Samsung's website right now has all sorts of specs wrong for the Notebook 9. Don't believe what they say. And the 15-inch, they forget to mention it has NVIDIA 940MX graphics, for example. Dope. Good job, Samsung. When it comes to chargers, both of them come with a compact charger with a barrel pin style connector. Though LG doesn't explicitly state this, it does support USB charging, as do the Samsung Notebook 9. So I tested the LG Gram 14 using the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon's USB-C based charger, and it worked just fine there. Now, Samsung has fast charging, so they claim about an hour and a half to charge the 13-inch from 0 to full, and 100 minutes for the 15-inch, which is actually pretty handy. Now, LG wins hands down if you're looking at the smaller model, because all three LG Gram models have a 60-watt-hour battery, so 13, 14, and 15-inch. Now, with the Samsung, there's no 14-inch, so the 13-inch has just a 30-watt-hour battery. That's half the capacity. They do have good power management, but still, I had no problems under the same use case of light to moderate use, web browsing, Word, Excel, WordPress, a few photo edits, streaming some video. No problem with the LG Gram 14 hitting 10 hours on a charge with brightness set at 40%. The Samsung Notebook 9 13-inch under the same use case did about 7 hours. So there's certainly a big difference there. And if you push power management on LG, I'm sure you could go even farther. It's really very impressive. Now, if you move on to the 15-inch, things kind of get about the same because the 15-inch Notebook 9 has a 66-watt-hour battery, so 6 watt-hours bigger than the LG. And it too runs 10 hours on a charge easily, as long as you're not, playing a game or engaging dedicated graphics constantly with Adobe Premiere or something like that. So battery life's about the same for the big guys. But when you're looking at the small ones, LG definitely pulls ahead. So it's a fairly close race, isn't it, in a lot of ways? And part of it's going to depend on the size you want, the looks you want, that sort of thing. I think the LG is the prettier one, but the Samsung really is pretty nice and clean looking and probably will age well in terms of design. When it comes to the 15-inch models, hands down, the Samsung's going to win. You're going to get Thunderbolt 3, you're going to get the dedicated graphics, even if it's low end, it helps. Hey, that's pretty nice, and a much lower price tag. If you're looking at the 13-inch models, or even moving to the 14-inch model with the LG Gram that we have here is $1,500. It's kind of a high spend, but it's in line with the XPS 13, with which it competes as well, I suppose. It gets to be a tighter race, but I have a preference for Samsung software. I like the different color profiles for color temperatures on the display, better out-of-the-box calibration. I like that outdoor mode. I like the HDR mode, too, for video. And the fingerprint scanner. I feel like you get a couple more bells and whistles, but the drawback is no touchscreen. If you want a touchscreen, back to LG again. So there you have it, the LG Gram for 2017 and the 2017 Samsung Notebook 9. Neither of these is going to help you build any muscles, and that's the idea. For those of you who need typical, pure, ultrabook Core i5, i7 power in the lightest possible guise, well, here they are. And they both have their merits. I think in particular the LG is going to win on looks for a lot of people because it has the trendy look right now with the colors, the black keyboard letters, that sort of thing. The Samsung is going to win for the purists who just want a traditional laptop that's as light as possible, because in the 13-inch size, it is the lighter of the two, though they're both so light. I mean, really, but you can tell the difference. But in the 15-inch end, the Samsung Notebook 9 definitely wins with the dedicated graphics, the Thunderbolt 3, the faster PCIe NVMe SSD for less money than the LG Gram 15. Ouch, ouch, ouch. So there you have it. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this video.